episode 176. Does the universe make us egoistic?
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And we are back on a gorgeous motherfucking Monday. Welcome to the very best podcast in the world, your only source in the universe for personal supremacy through health, wealth, and happiness. Now, judging by the title, you're probably thinking what drugs I have taken today to come up with such a stupid name for a podcast episode. Right, but much less so. It's very deep. Well, actually, it's not. If the universe is deep, yeah, but no. It's very interesting and based upon a podcast I heard where the discussion was about the ego and its impact on our lives, and so on and so forth, and long road to no answer, really. I think it wasted a good 2 hours of my life listening to this. However, there came certain revelations. When I went to bed, looked outside, saw the Milky Way, and started contemplating a few things which we're going to outline today. And before we start with that, it's, as always, time for housekeeping. So without further ado, sharing is caring, people. So if you listen to this episode and you think, hey, maybe my buddy Mike is interested, or my buddy Ranjit, or my buddy Stanislav, or whomever you are close to, make sure to share this episode with them. If you find the episode itself by any chance impressive, share it through your social media feeds. It is very easy. Go to the very best podcast in the world.com. Under every post, under every page, under everything is really this big list of share-a-madoodles, which let you punch out and scream out to the world that you support this podcast, which you should, because it's totally fucking altruistic. That being said, slash and housekeeping, I think it's a good point, right? So where does our ego come from? First of all, what is our ego, right? It's this self-perception, really, in an egoistic way. I think the word kind of gives it away, and everybody has their own interpretation, right? There's those of you who, don't like to be trifled with and fucked around with because it would hurt your ego, while others would be like, meh, in exactly the same situation. So for my understanding, it's a degree of humility you have towards the world, right? It's like if somebody tries to put you down, you're like, okay, and that can change throughout life, right? When people used to push me around and I was younger, and it would end in conflict. Not always physical, but quite often. But I let go of that, right? Ego was also myself, in the center of the universe. And that's what this episode is about. In the center of the universe, meaning the clothes I was wearing couldn't be expensive enough, right? Despite the fact that my grandmother, who worked in a garments factory, said, look, kid, Same difference, whether they put a Hugo Boss sticker in the trench coat or a, cheap discount supermarket logo in the back. The price is the difference, and there's a bit more quality control to it. And I heard that, and I could rationalize it. I was a clever cookie, even as a kid. But the notion that something could be just as good, something just as representative, for me, it was essential to have a brand, a recognizable brand name to cry out to the world that this garment that I was wearing was fucking expensive. No idea where that came from, but it was my ego, wanting to present myself to the world, and, couldn't stand having a smudge on my sweater or, whatever it was. Didn't really work out. I later let go of that and a large variety of other things. And it happened with a bang when I decided to kind of leave the hamster wheel and retire early, or at least semi-retire, right? Reported enough about this on the podcast, so I'm not going to go into it. So it's like you want the higher your ego, the higher your need to have people circling around you in your, well, what do you call it? Orbit, right? Sorry, lost the word. So you need, more and more people looking at you, finding you interesting. And you need the people around you to feed your ego. And that can very quickly go south, right? And if you look at that, particularly the term orbit, that's what kind of came to my mind when I, listened to aforementioned podcast episode and looked out the window, saw the Milky Way before going to bed. I kind of thought about, from the smallest particles, that atoms, the smallest particle, but the atoms we have around with their neutrons and, the things. And I'm not going to go into physics. I sucked at it, to be perfectly blunt. Up until the galaxies that we see, our own, even the solar system, it's the same fucking thing, right? We see something gravitating around other bodies. And I think that's, a very apt comparison to make between the ego and so on and so forth. Here's the trouble, though. The more attractive you become, and I think that's the relative term, the more people you are going to attract to yourself, right? Here's the thing. You don't need to be a loner. I'm not saying that. I went down that route, and it's very comfortable for me. And there are people who need a lot of social contact. I get it, right? But make sure not to become attractive to a point where all you do is cater to other people's needs to a degree where you neglect your own. Let me repeat that. When your ego gets too strong, you attract too many people to yourself. And you have to pay attention to them, and you listen to them, and they're taking up so much of your time. You inevitably start to neglect yourself in the process, right? Imagine our solar system. The sun, for whatever reason, starts to build up more gravity, right? It's going to take in all of the planets around it, which are all the people who are attracted to you, and it's going to burn them, right? Because it's this ego mania, ego explosion going on that will take place if you cater to other people's needs, but not to your own. That's, I think, the point I was trying to make. Hope it comes across. Anywho, It's like, is this resemblance that I found actually convertible to the ego, right? Every one of us needs some kind of confirmation, right, in life. We need to know from the outside world, did we do a good job? We need feedback from our friends and relatives. Are we good people, right? We can't just depend on larger society and the legal system to do so. Your parents tell you when you grow up that you're not supposed to be doing those things. Why do we do that? Those are values which we, as a society, said, we'll adhere to these, right? It's this, and then we get to a point where these things are indoctrinated into us without questioning them, right? But imagine yourself going into another society, right? I lived in the Maldives for quite a while, and there it was, it wasn't all too religious, but it was kind of like standard practice for, if you visited Male, the main island, or the island of the islands of the what do you call? Jeez, I'm losing so many words here. Of the indigenous people, right? Of the citizens of the Maldives, women were supposed to keep their shoulders covered, right? They didn't ask them to wear any veils or anything like that. I've seen different, but the thing is, the culture clash was so high that a lot of women just didn't bother, right? They were there on vacation. They were so fucking egoistic about their indoctrinated values and these feminist movement values that they grew up with, that they couldn't be bothered to respect another culture, much less another religion, by just putting on a t-shirt instead of a tank top, right? And that's, I think, where ego kind of goes apeshit, right? You disrespect other people just to prove a point. And I think that's where we get into a situation where ego gets out of control very easily. So, do we naturally expect everything to orbit around us? And is that the ultimate goal of ego-driven people, right? Now, for me, picture myself 20 years ago, I was wearing sweaters that were, couldn't be expensive enough. Right now, I couldn't give less fucks about what I wear as long as it looks good. Quality is going to be the same. 10 years after my grandmother passing, I probably got the point. 15 years actually. And from there on, I started to give much less about my external representation. I still won't run around like an idiot most of the times. But point is, you come to this conclusion: the attractiveness that your ego conveys to the outside world reduces, and you start to have a lot more available time for yourself, which then will lead to self-enlightenment. And that was what it kind of made interesting for me. This development was probably one of the, if not the most impactful of my life. So, in that sense, I hope I was able to convey what I was trying to convey. And whether it's the universe or the structures of our entire universe, which are found everywhere, are similar to ego. At least for myself, I was able to draw the comparison. So, in that sense, I hope everybody has a great rest of their Monday. If you've already had your Monday, have a good night. And we'll be in touch tomorrow. Peace out, folks.